All right, Ben Hardy-Jones, welcome to Tasty Humans. Thank you very much for doing this.
But thank you for having me.
No problem. So for everybody that's going to watch, just quickly introduce yourself and what you do.
Sure. So I'm Ben Hardy-Jones, the sustainability lead at Desert Vipers cricket franchise. I'm from the UK, but Desert Vipers are a Dubai-based team. And so it's my job around the year to try and understand how we can be better as a franchise. My background is that I'm 24. I have been to university, studied sustainability, and I'm now living in London in the UK.
So one place I'd like to start is what you've just said, which is you studied sustainability. Now, it's no secret that anyone watching can see I'm vastly older than you, hopefully. But the thing is I'm no stranger to say it, and it's no secret if anyone that's watched any podcasts I've done about sustainability is that I do come from the era of it was the ozone layer, and then I think it was plastic straws are bad. And now sustainability has taken on a whole new world, and it's something that I'm being educated in more and more every day. This wasn't something you would study, it wasn't available. So how did that become available, and what got you into that?
Yes, well, I think I at the age of 17 had to pick my university choice, and I was really torn between engineering and geography.
Interesting.
And I was very close to choosing engineering at university. And I was thinking about sort of chemical engineering and how we create products and how we can minimize the costs associated with that and the environmental impact. And then I thought, well, actually, I could do that through geography in terms of looking at how to reduce waste, reduce energy, all that kind of thing. And actually, geography is a lot more fun. It's interesting. It's about people. It's about the planet. It's more human and personal. So I grew up in North Wales as well, which is a stunning place of part of the world. And from my kitchen, you can see the Clwydian mountain range, which is a fantastic place to go walking, and you can see the seasons changing. And so that natural connection ultimately tipped me over the edge and into doing geography. So I did my undergraduate in physical geography at Durham University, and I was at university during COVID. So part of my experience was minimized because of that, and I felt that when I got to the end that I hadn't quite learned as much as I wanted to, and I hadn't had the same experiences. So I then did a 1-year master's course at the University of Oxford, which was called Environmental Change and Management, which is basically sustainability by another name. So the kind of broad understanding through geography then led me to a more specific sustainability course, and actually in that 1 year I learnt so much, and everything just clicked, everything came together, and the things that I'd learnt in my undergraduate over 3 years really kind of became something that I felt I could then utilise in the world and have a positive impact.
Was your upbringing very sort of sustainable? Were you in a very sustainable household? Because you're saying there from very early on, you're already thinking about how to reduce waste and chemical engineering, etc. Was this something that was very big in the home?
Yeah, I think no, to be honest.
Okay.
I think there were certain parts that were so we had that connection to nature. On all of our family holidays, we take time off and walk around and go and explore different areas. So in terms of connection to nature, definitely. In terms of our actual carbon footprint and consumption, I don't think my parents would mind me saying this, but I've been nagging them for several years to get solar panels on our roof. And the answer is always, oh, well, we'll look into it, but we might move house soon. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, okay, but still they'll be there for someone else. So certainly in our own actions, we try and do what we can. But and I think my family would like to think they do more than the average person, and they probably do. But it certainly wasn't, everyone's vegan, everyone, we have an electric car, because we don't at this point in time. So I think the connection was there, but in terms of the actual impact, no, I'm not from that background.
Okay. Have they done a lot more since you've sort of risen up through the ranks of this?
So I nag them, and my mum's now started buying more plant-based food. She started buying different items which are biodegradable, and we're fortunate enough to have a local refill store in our town, so we'll go and get our food and dried food and refill it, and it won't have any of the plastic packaging. So they're certainly doing a lot more over the last few years, but there's still plenty more that they could do.
I bet you're great at family gatherings.
No, I try not to preach too much at those, but yeah.
Excellent. So you went to Oxford, and I raised this because I inner city public schooling is in the East End of London was sort of my thing. But Oxford and Cambridge, I mean, how would you describe those two universities to somebody from Dubai that probably doesn't know maybe what that means?
Yes, I went to Cambridge for an open day, and that was it. But certainly at Oxford, over my 12 months there, I think the best way to describe it is a place where you feel very fortunate to have gone there. It's not necessarily that the teaching is considerably better than... I also went to Durham for my undergraduate, which I recognised was also a fantastic opportunity and great university. But I felt that at Oxford, the opportunities that you get from that are vast. And certainly how I came into this job was through an internship with the university. So I felt that actually everything came together, and then I could use the fact that I had been there to then go on and make big changes. And I think the key thing that the Vice-Chancellor said to me, or not to me, but to the room on our graduation day, is it's not what you learn at Oxford that's important, it's how you then approach the world and how you think using what you have sort of been taught over the past 12 months, 3 years, whatever. So it's more about approaching things with an open mind and actually trying to view things in a way where you can make an impact and make a difference.
That's amazing. And I do, because Oxford and Cambridge are always, I suppose, for probably to make a terrible comparison, almost like the Stanford and Harvard of the UK, where it was the elite that managed to get there, and sort of what that did for your education. So what did you do then coming out of that? You know, like you said, you've got this new mindset, and what was your sort of first inspiration?
Well, I think it started while I was there. So for my dissertation, I looked at the carbon footprint of independent restaurants and how they could get towards net zero. And the reason that I chose that topic was because I'd learnt this stuff on my course, and I felt that I already wanted to apply it even while I was studying. So the first thing that I did on my dissertation was quantify the carbon footprint of different restaurants, and interviewed restaurant owners. And that for me was my first step into thinking about how I could use the content I'd learnt in my degree and then apply it to the real world. And that had many challenges, because one restaurant owner that I interviewed was from a steakhouse, which is terrible for the environment, but actually hearing that perspective was fantastic. And comparing that to a vegan restaurant was equally important to understand the full range of different opinions and ideas and ways that people want to go about things. So
how were you received?
Well,
because I know restaurant people very well, you know. So how, especially going back, what might have been 5-6 years? Is that right?
No, just a couple of years ago.
Oh, okay. So how were you received by my lot?
Yeah, I interviewed a range of cuisines. So one was a steakhouse, Italian, Mexican, Indian, everything really. And I did a range of different locations, so rural and urban and different cities. So actually, I found that rural restaurant owners were a lot less receptive to this. So one of my questions was, if there were a meat tax, which was something that had been floated about at the time, how would that impact what dishes you decided to put on the menu? And a few people got very defensive at that point in time and said that customers wouldn't turn up, and their chefs wouldn't quite know what else to cook, or they really wanted to cook meat, and that was the whole reason they were a chef, is because that was their speciality. So I think it was interesting, because it then informs how you then go about and make changes, and if you make changes that ultimately bring people with you rather than alienate them.
Well, you know what, we're under pressure as an industry, especially in the last 12 to 18 months, to have a lot more vegan options on our menus. And I think the greatest respectful comment I could say about this is that the rise of I don't know the right word, veganism, I think is the right way to say it. So the rise of veganism is where if there was like a group of 12 and one of them was a vegan, and then we didn't have anything for vegans, the rest of the group would just say, well, can't you have something vegetarian? Or say something probably quite insulting to them. Now, if there isn't anything for the specific vegan palate, they won't book.
Yeah.
So now it's really made its, and it is a compliment. It's really made its way into mainstream menus where you have to have it, you have to cater for it. And I've been really pleasantly surprised by some of the stuff that people I work with have managed to come up with. So
yeah, well, I think that what you've just said could have been a direct quote from one of the owners that I interviewed. So I went to Essex, which is I think you're from there.
Where I was born,
so I went to Southend and interviewed a restaurant owner.
Used to go a lot when I was a kid.
And obviously seafood is really important when you're next to the sea. Lots of people choose that. But we did talk about the vegan options on the menu, and he said, yes, if there's a group of 12, they just won't come if you don't have the option and one person is. So I think it's about opening the doors and giving people a choice and a possibility, and ultimately, if there's at least one or two items there, then people do have the opportunity to make those choices, and then subtly encouraging them over time.
So when you say meat tax, I think that's very interesting. I don't recall ever hearing anything like this within the industry, but what were they suggesting?
Well, it was loosely floated about, if I understand this correctly, in 2023 when the Prime Minister of the UK, Rishi Sunak, at the time, scrapped a whole load of environmental policies, which was frustrating for me. But there were reasons why he did it politically. But one of the things that he scrapped was a meat tax, which there wasn't a planned date for that, but it was something that was talked about. So one of the reasons that frustrated me is because when I calculated the carbon footprint of the restaurant and included everything, including energy and electricity and gas and waste, 25% of all the carbon footprint was from beef and just beef alone. And this was restaurants that served all sorts of different items. So the fact that a quarter was from one item meant that I could confidently say if you switch that for chicken or for a white meat, which is much lower in its carbon footprint, then you could drastically reduce the emissions overnight. So certainly on the red meats, a meat tax to subtly nudge the consumer towards a more sustainable option would have been something that personally I would be in favour of. But I understand that obviously the cost of food in the last few years has risen compared to previously, so people don't want that to rise even more through taxes.
Okay, what? One thing when I read about you and what you've studied and everything, one thing that really interested me is that I work for Media One Hotel. It's got the Green Key. It's somewhere that has educated me massively on the topic of sustainability. One word that I've been led to be exposed to now is called greenwashing, which is, again, for the people that don't know this, it's people that say they're being sustainable, but they're kind of not. And I did a sustainability event once, and a journalist turned up who specialised in this. And it's the first time I got into it. Now, what's interesting about you is that you've really studied this, on a very, very high level. And when you just said about how the beef is contributing to 25% of all of the issues, what is let's say, would you break down like maybe the equation or the journey that it goes on to cause all of the problem? Because it could, like I said, it will definitely educate me.
Yes. Yeah. Well, a lot of restaurants promote the fact that their meat is local, which can be misleading. But I think the difference between being greenwashing or misleading is that often when they are saying this, they genuinely believe that it is better for the environment. Now, actually, what matters more is how it's produced rather than where it comes from. So if you have, for example, chicken, which comes from Australia, and you're consuming that in the UK, that is still better for the environment than beef, which comes from a farm 10 miles down the road, because the method of production is the overwhelming contributor to the footprint. So things like the amount of land it consumes, the food that it eats, obviously the methane that comes from cows when they fart. So actually that's more important. But in the case of restaurants, I wouldn't say that's greenwashing, because I think it comes from a lack of understanding of what is important in environmental issues. And where greenwashing is the case, I think it's from those organisations who do know that actually their impacts are overwhelmingly negative. They don't have a plan to reduce that, but they don't want negative PR, so they do promote maybe one or two positive things that they're doing, which, when we're talking about scales and quantities, are on the small end rather than the bigger changes that can be made.
Okay. Because obviously we've got a lot to unpack, hopefully, around Desert Vipers and what
Yes.
you're doing in Dubai and how bad Man United are and stuff like this. What would be like a parting shot then for the restaurant game, for what you've actually learned and who you spoke to? What would be something you would advise me on, possibly to go away and do immediately?
I think every restaurant should put the carbon footprint of each dish next to that dish. So at the moment we have prices and we have sometimes calories. I think adding the third element of environmental impact will educate consumers, and ultimately food is something that's very personal. So changes to the food industry will be consumer driven. So I think if people understand the impacts of the environmental impacts of their choices, then hopefully a few of them will be changed. So at our team hotel at the moment, we've put carbon footprint labels on the menu at one of the restaurants. And this restaurant serves steak, it serves beef and lamb and red meat, which is bad for the environment. But we're trying to see if adding this extra level of information can help educate and make people choose the more positive option.
How is that being calculated?
There's a global database which takes all of the scientific studies that have ever happened, and they separate it by type of ingredient, and then you times that by the weight of the ingredients in each dish, and it gives you an overall score. Now, it could be a lot more personalised, but that would take lots of time. And like I said before, it matters not really where it comes from, but overall, how is it produced?
Because when it comes to doing the calorie thing, which we've looked at in places that I've worked in, you have to get this extremely on the nose. Otherwise, the consumer has a way of throwing that back at you. I was just wondering whether, do you have like a disclaimer in the menu that says it's an approximation, or?
Not at the place where we've done it, but we do have comparisons. So obviously, if I was to say a dish of beef would be 25 kilograms of CO2 and a chicken would be 5, you don't know what that means. There's no context to that. So what I've done instead is I've said it's 25 kilograms, and if you were to drive from the team hotel to the stadium where we play our games, that's 22 kilograms.
Okay,
so it's equivalent to driving that distance, and people, I think, understand that better around.
Yeah, you are 100% right. That is what I think the average person needs to understand, that what is the comparison that they can resonate with.
Yes, exactly. Or what is a flight's worth, or what is buying a trainer or buying something worth. I think having those comparisons can really help people to then begin to sort of understand and almost budget in a way. You know, if you think, you understand, if you go to a shop and you see that, a bottle of water is £30, you'd be outraged. But that's because you know roughly what it should be. So if you know roughly what something should be, then you can make informed decisions.
No, that would be extremely helpful with people, definitely. So, okay, so restaurants, how did you transition then into what you're doing now?
The idea behind choosing restaurants was that they're quite social places. So I would go into a restaurant, and if I had a fantastic experience, I would then take that into other parts of my life. So if I ate a dish I'd never had before, I would then think about cooking it myself. Or if it was from a particular country, I would then think more favourably about that country's cuisine. So I thought, how can I use what I've learned to make a positive impact? And sport is something that also you take away into your own life. So, you know, we're going to talk about Man United and Chelsea later, even though we're in Dubai and it's a podcast sort of, you know, not specifically on those things. But the reason that we are is because we're passionate about it.
Yes, definitely.
So if if your team that you support does something positive, then you can take that into your own life. And I think that's ultimately what I wanted to do in my career, is to have as big a positive impact as I could. And the opportunity arose with Desert Vipers to come in and do something with them.
How did that opportunity arise?
Well, it was an internship, and one of my friends sent me a voice note and said, "Oh, there's an opportunity with a cricket team in Dubai. They're looking for someone in sustainability." And I listened to it and I thought, "No, it's not for me. I don't like cricket, so I'm not interested in that." And then I sat on it for a few days, and I thought, actually, don't be so silly. This is a great opportunity. Even though I'm not a cricket fan, or wasn't a cricket fan, I think that's a good thing. So I'm a big sports fan. I play any sports I can. I watch anything, but I've never really had the opportunity to watch or play cricket because my summer sport was tennis.
Okay.
So I thought, okay, hang on. I think it's a good thing that I don't know anything about cricket, because I can authentically go in and question why things are done in the way they are, rather than coming in thinking it has to be this way because this is how cricket does it. I could then come in and say, actually, this doesn't make any sense. What are you doing? Why are you following the Indian model, the Indian Premier League model, or why are you doing it in this way? So that came about. It was 6 months. I started in October of 2023. I had my first tournament this time last year, and then at the end of the tournament, I was offered a full-time role. So I'm now full-time, and it's no longer an internship, which is fantastic. And I think that's something that other sports teams can learn from, is that there's lots of young people like myself who have studied sustainability and can bring a sort of fresh new insight and add value to the existing practices.
So what did you do when you first turned up? Did you look at what they were doing and think,
Yeah. They were just about to publish a sustainability strategy report, and I came in sort of fresh out of my degree, a bit hot-headed, and said, "Oh, actually, there's certain elements here which I would change." And they'd spent 3 or 4 months working on this, and I think it was a bit annoying for them, to be honest, that in the 11th hour I came in and had these suggestions. But I think it was really when I came to Dubai for the first time in November of 2023 when things really clicked. So I'd done about 6 weeks at that point. I was looking at how we were measuring our carbon footprint. I was looking at how we could communicate this with fans. I was looking at how we could work with business partners and potential business partners. And so when I came here, I then understood the whole Dubai ecosystem. And that was really when things, I think, clicked for me. And I realised where I could make a difference at that point.
So what were some of the things you did sort of straight off the bat? Like, people might look at cricket and think, well, or any sports team. Like I said, I'm a Chelsea fan, you're a Man U fan. I wouldn't even know where to start trying to suggest Chelsea Football Club being more sustainable. I mean, maybe not buying every player that becomes available. But so what were the things you implemented immediately?
I think the very first thing that you should do is understand your score. So this is where sporting analogies are quite interesting and useful, because if Chelsea were losing 4-0 at half time, or sorry, let's say they lost the game 4-0.
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Remember when they lost the game 4-0?
Yes,
and the manager, if he were to come out and say, "Oh, we played really well, like we're really unlucky, like it was a great game," everyone in the crowd or the fans would say, "No, I don't think that's right." And that's where I think greenwashing comes into play, because with sustainability, if you measure your carbon footprint, then you know what the score is. And if your score is bad, if you have lost 4-0, then you at least know where you can take the steps to improve. So I think every sports organisation should measure their environmental impact, which the most common method is the carbon footprint report. Mm-hmm. And so once you do that, then you can then identify, is it all coming from flights? Is it all coming from kit? Is it coming from fan travel? And you can see what those areas are that you need to address. And that relates really to business strategy. It's a bit like financial reporting. If you've got massive losses in one area, there's no point pretending that doing something small over here will make a difference, when actually you need to address the biggest thing first. So for us, in our season 1 carbon footprint report, we found that flying was the biggest part of our footprint. So we have players flying in from different leagues. Some of our players in season 1 and 2 then went to play international competitions and flew there and back, and then went on to fly somewhere else. And then you've got the management flights as well. So we looked at that, and the biggest change that we made overnight was we changed the class of how we flew.
Okay.
So in sports, for our team at least, it was standard to fly business class, which is a nice thing to do. But actually, when you're taking your share of the carbon footprint, because you take it by the area of plane, business class, you account for more area, so you take a larger share. And that's sort of supply and demand linked. So if every plane had more economy seats, you could have more planes in this, you could have more people transported, and then fewer planes, saving fuel. So we then changed overnight how we flew. So all management now fly economy as standard. If there's a particular need to fly business class, we're not, martyrs. We understand that sometimes it's needed. Like if you've got a business meeting in the morning and you've got an overnight flight, that's important. So
how was their reaction? Because business class is nice.
Yes,
it's incredibly accommodating.
Yeah.
And if you're doing it through a company, and then suddenly in comes this youngster from abroad who says, right, no more business.
Yeah. So I think they'd already decided that just before I joined, which was nice. And the best thing about Desert Vipers is that the CEO is 100% on board. So the CEO of an elite sporting organisation now flies in economy, which is quite a funny thing to contemplate. One thing that we never do is impact player performance. So we offer incentives for players to fly economy, but if they want to fly business, we say that's fine, because for players that's important. But for someone like me, where physical performance doesn't matter, then actually economy
need to sleep,
is
or
great.
possibly
And
need to sleep.
And actually, when I first went on the plane, so I'm used to flying around Europe when I do fly, and it's typical sort of low cost budget airlines. And I got on this Emirates flight, and I was walking down. I thought, this is fantastic. Like, I need to keep going until I get to economy. And I got to the end of the plane, and I was like, hang on, where's economy? And what my perception of what I was used to with budget airlines was actually the economy in Emirates was so much better than economy elsewhere that I felt it was fantastic. So I think it certainly is good enough. And that overnight changed our footprints by around 100 tons, reduced it by 100 tons. And to put that into context, our entire footprint is about 800, or was 870 tons. So it's a 15% saving just by doing one thing.
I wanted to ask a really silly question, but I'm allowed to ask it because of my age. But
sure.
Do you think there's anything long-term that could be done to air travel in order to really start to iron this out, as far as the electric versus gas-powered cars and stuff like this? Is there anything in the pipeline being developed that could ever take this on? Or
yes, I certainly think so, and it has to really. Short-term, in short-haul flights, electric planes will probably become the future. Okay. So anything less than 3 hours, I think, would become electric in 10, 20, 30 years. And then long-haul flights, I think biofuels, or what's called sustainable aviation fuel, will come along. And so these are fuels made from typically food waste or food crops. So what's important there is that we need to reduce and increase the efficiency of planes and reduce the amount of fuel that's needed, because otherwise that's food that is going into fuel when probably it should be going into the food chain and supporting people's health and people actually eating it. So I think the overall efficiency of planes and even things like how you get to the plane, like are you going in an electric vehicle on the ground, or are you being transported in a car, or how are they refueling? There's so many different things that they can do in the short term to increase efficiency, including put more seats in planes by having fewer business seats. And then long term, there's technological advancements that will make it possible to fly in a more sustainable way.
Interesting. Listen, I definitely know a lot of people that fly business that don't need to be there.
Yes, yeah. And I don't think they'll mind me saying this. It saved us £100,000 as a franchise over a year. So it's not just a win for the planet, but we then save that money, which we can then use if we need to spend on other things, positive environmental things as well.
I think hopefully there'll be a lot of people that might watch this episode that have just suddenly made huge impacts onto their P&L.
Yeah, 100%.
So all that Desert Vipers, you have a connection to Avram Glazer?
Yes,
Is that
we do.
right?
Yes, so he is the owner of Desert Vipers, and it's just him. It's not the other Glazer members of the family. It's just him.
How was that? Because you're a Man United fan, so
Yes,
obviously
I
you were a
am,
Man
yeah.
United fan before the Desert Vipers thing came along. But so how was that sort of making that connection? Have you met him?
Yes, I have actually. Yeah, it was last year's sustainability match. So this was one game of the year where we played in green and we tried to champion sustainability and sort of showcase all the efforts that we do year round in a focused activity. So he came to that match and he was very impressed with what we did. And this, for me, last year was something that I planned, and we've just had our sustainability match this year, which was again a really great day. And after the match, he came up to me and shook my hand and said, "Very well done, Ben. That was a great game." And that was for me a really great moment as a Man United fan.
Yeah, of
I
course.
know lots of other Man United fans would disagree with me, but that interaction and from what I've seen with my time at Desert Vipers, I think he's actually just a really normal, nice, friendly bloke, and I don't think the problems at Man United that have happened historically have arisen from their ownership. And I think,
Do you know what? I'm not just saying this. I don't either.
Yeah.
You know, not just speaking about Chelsea as a team, but coming from the days of Roman Abramovich.
Yes.
You know, we had a chairman that just put his hand in his pocket, and everyone wanted to attribute this to all different types of things, and definitely not going down that road. But I do remember when Chelsea was saddled with, I think it was £700 million worth of debt, and he just transferred that straight off onto one of his other companies and paved the way for Chelsea to become financially secure, which you can look at this in whatever way you want, but it's a stunning amount of money just to absorb. And I do think when it comes to the Glazer conversation, I think that they've spent a lot of money on players. I'd have to say that to a Man U fan. You spend a lot of money on players, and it's not their fault what goes on the pitch.
No,
you know?
no. I think it's the most in the league over the last 10 years, or at least the second most. Maybe Chelsea have
I think Chelsea
overtaken
caught you
them in
up
recent
last year.
years.
Yeah.
But I think you find that a lot in football because they're all about communities, and these are institutions which are 150 years old in some cases. And so there's a lot of passion. And so I think when owners come in and they're not from that community, then it's very easy for fans to turn. And I think in many cases, not just Manchester United, but in loads of other cases, I think unfairly so. But certainly what I've seen with Desert Vipers, it's really all positive. I think what we're trying to do as a franchise is really great, and I wouldn't be working for them if it wasn't. And so having the support of the ownership is really key in that.
Amazing. How have you settled in Dubai?
It's certainly very different to where I'm from in North Wales in the UK. I think I'm still not used to the fact that I can't walk anywhere, and I've got to get a car, which is something that's I find tricky, because I like my exercise, like walking, but I really like it. Our team hotel is JA Resorts, which is by the Palm Jebel Ali, the new one, and it's a fantastic resort with 9-hole golf course, paddle, tennis. It's on the beach. Last year I went swimming every morning with the director of cricket and one of the coaches, and it's just such a nice base. And I find that in that part, the quieter part, it's a lot more where I'm from. Like it's a lot similar to North Wales in that respect, in terms of stunning scenery on the site and wildlife. And tomorrow we're actually having an exciting event where we are inviting school children to the site, and we're going to record all the different species of wildlife in what's called a BioBlitz. And the aim of that is to really showcase the value of nature and how important that is. But no, I really like Dubai. I think it's a fantastic place to be, and certainly to play cricket in. The conditions are fantastic. It doesn't rain, so like in the UK when all the matches are
it rains is what people don't realise. it rains enough in like 1 week
Yeah.
for a year. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Were you here last year
I wasn't, but
with
I
the
do.
flood?
Yeah, I get the feeling that rain here is like snow in the UK. Everything just stops if it happens. So
You can see, and Dubai won't mind me saying this, you can see that, and I totally understand it, they did not build Dubai thinking, what if it rains heavily? You know, because obviously the desert and everything like that, but when it really lets it go, yeah, there's mass flooding.
And that's where sustainability can help in that respect, because it's not just about reducing your environmental impact, it's also about preparing for future extreme weather events that come as a result of climate change. So Dubai, for example, is quite low-lying, so there will be more risk of flooding from sea level rise. So actually how we can play our part to help in that is something that we're looking at doing, and things like cricket matches being lost because of rain is something that will negatively financially affect the sport in the future. So that's something to look to in the future as well.
Now, you just mentioned the sea levels rising, and I wanted to ask, and these are sort of high-level statements because, again, it's not my area of expertise, and I look at this whole climate change. I look at this whole climate change conversation sometimes in a very like hedonistic way, where I've made statements before where there's a lot of people concerned about what's happening on the planet. There seems to be one or two very well-known names that are trying to get off the planet, and I look at it as in, is it all inevitable? Do you know what I mean? So inevitably we live maybe 80, 90 years if we're lucky, but where will we be in 1,000 years, or 2,000 years? And should there be more attention paid to leaving as well as staying and preserving? It's a strange question. It's because What do you think about?
It's
as a question,
quite a philosophical question.
Yeah.
But it's something that's quite interesting. I think for me the main thing is that scientists have identified, I don't know to what magnitude, but thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of planets in the world. In the universe, and this is the only one that they've ever found like strong signs of life on. So I think it would be pessimistic to think that actually, things are inevitable and we should look at leaving. But but that's where sports can play a role, because even if you're losing 3-0, in the last minute, look at Man United last week losing to Southampton in the 82nd minute. And then Amad Diallo goes and scores a hat-trick in 14 minutes or something. So actually, if you just said to a fan before that, who's watching their team be 1-0 down, actually, we're going to win this 3-1, they're probably thinking, well, that's a bit optimistic. I don't think that will happen. But the narratives and the comebacks in sports, I think, is what we can translate and take to sustainability on our planet. And actually, we are in extra time. We're losing. But there is still time to change the clock and or to change the score, and I think that's where sports can be a champion for sustainability in a positive way. So hopefully we don't need to resort to leaving, and there will be changes and negative ones from an environmental point of view, but if we can minimize how negative those are and then maximize the positive outcomes, then we can make a positive difference.
I just ask, what sort of timeframes do you think we're looking at? I just find the whole conversation fascinating. It's not like trying to lead you into any type of statement. It's just, some people say 10 years. I remember Al Gore came out with The Inconvenient Truth, which was back in 2004. And I was fascinated by it, because it was the first time we'd ever really seen this type of documentary or presentation put together where it claimed 20, 30, 40 years time how different things are going to be. So what do you, now being, and I will say it's like an expert in my eyes on this, what do you think, where will it go?
I think I watched that in biology class when I was 15, and it was quite scary.
I think
that the main thing for me is that there are things already happening. So things like flooding events in Spain, in Valencia recently, which the way that you do it scientifically is you say how likely it would have been without climate change. So therefore the contribution of climate change to the event. So I think that was like on the scale of basically it would be impossible without climate change. It maybe would happen once in 100 1,000 years or something. So basically virtually impossible. So actually there are already things happening now in terms of where we can get to and when things will be, well, I wouldn't say stop worrying about it, but it would become less of a concern politically and elsewhere. I think most organisations have targets for 2050 to try and get to net zero. So that's where their emissions have been reduced by 90%. So they're virtually at zero, and then you can offset the remaining 10% through planting trees, through direct air capture of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and then storing that underground. So I think 2050 is obviously what people have pledged to do. I think it needs to happen before that. So Desert Vipers have pledged for 2040, but there's a lot of moving parts that are dependent on it. And last year we saw the biggest increase in atmospheric CO2 levels ever. So still we're heading in the wrong direction, but I think that's where we can turn it around. And it's a long-term vision, but with short-term actions that we can take now.
Okay, so based on that, what's coming up now with the Vipers then? What's sort of the next steps that you're taking?
This year we are playing in fully recycled kit. We are the only top tier cricket team in the world to do that, we believe. So what I'm wearing at the moment is made by a UAE based company called PalmFit, and that's what we also try and do. We look to support UAE companies and businesses. And every item of kit that the team wears from PalmFit is made from fully recycled materials. So that's reduced our emissions from kits by 50%. So that's the big focus for this year. Any team in the world, grassroots to professional level, can do this overnight. We've proven this. Using PalmFit would be fantastic for UAE companies because that local aspect also reduces the footprint by 8%. So overnight, by changing the material, by choosing local, you have a 60% near-on reduction in your carbon footprint. And so that's the big focus for this year. Now, because we're a franchise team, there's not that much that we control. So it's about working with stakeholders, with our hotel, with other organisations that we use, suppliers, to try and make them more sustainable and help them on that journey. So the big things that we've done are water, by replacing single-use plastic water bottles through a partnership with Blue Water. So you won't see our players on the pitch drink out of any single-use plastic water bottles, which is a first in cricket, in franchise cricket. And we've changed our kit. So the two big things, and we've changed how we fly. So the three big things that we can do as a sports organisation, we have done. So it's now about thinking about working with people and showing them what we can do together.
And is that, those three things, is that something that would be very easy for a lot of other teams to do? And I'm talking like global sports teams. So when we say Chelsea, Man United, stuff like this, are these things easy to switch to?
Yes, yeah, the materials exist. Certainly the fully recycled materials. It's not the final stop. I think there's more to come, and how can you make something infinitely recyclable? So once I finish with this, can I turn it into another identical piece of clothing? That will be, I think, the best solution that we can get over the next few years. But yeah, it's very easy. I think it just needs buy-in from the management staff. It needs education and training for the people implementing it on the day-to-day lives, and I think ultimately educating some of the players as well, so that they can then use their global platforms to ultimately make a big difference in all of their fans and followers' lives.
I know that. So when it comes to things like the Premier League, who's the most sustainable team in the Premier League? Or I didn't know how to end that. Or not.
In football, it's probably Forest Green Rovers, who are a fully vegan club. Last year, I think their kits were made out of bamboo or coffee grounds or something quite interesting. This year, I think they're now using fully recycled materials like Desert Vipers. They're very much, I think, looking at how they can reduce their own impact and also fans. But in terms of like Premier League clubs, I don't know, to be honest. There's no club really shouting about it from the rooftops. I think Arsenal recently have done some good stuff. They've launched their net zero target.
So I had to get a little dig at Arsenal.
Why not? Actually, I met the ESG manager of Chelsea, and they're doing some really good stuff. So I think there's lots of people working behind the scenes to make a positive impact. It's just whether the clubs now can really champion that and use their platform in a positive way.
Okay. So look, you're very young. You're 24. Do you know what I mean? I'm so jealous. But so where are you going then? Like you've had a great journey so far, from where you've come from, Oxford, here, Dubai, meeting one of the Glazers, etc.
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself going? Where do you want to take all this?
Well, I would like to continue working with the Vipers for the foreseeable. I think what we've started is really clicking now. We're seeing large organisations from across the UAE interested in us from a sustainability point of view. So I would like to prove that the business model works, because ultimately, if we do that, then other teams will follow. And for now, I think that's the biggest impact I can have. I think there's still plenty of things that we can do as an organisation that I would like to change, and then we'll see in 2 or 3 years' time what the global system's looking like, if sport is looking like it's the avenue to make change, or if it's a different industry. But I think for now, the opportunities in Dubai with Desert Vipers and the support from the management team allow me to try and achieve my own personal goal of having an impact.
Okay, amazing. Well, look, I've had a great time. I love talking to people like yourselves, because I find it great and challenging in the conversation. As I said before we started, there's no questions and edits and scripts and everything. So we're just sort of making it up as we go along in the conversation. I learn a lot with these things because I come from a much different generation. But if there's one thing you would leave me or anybody with, and I think this could be very, very important, because what is the one very small thing that we could all do that we might not know about, that we could just adjust, that would make the biggest changes in this?
I think the most important thing that we all can do is talk about this stuff with those around us. So there's many different ways that we can have a positive impact, and it's not one thing that we do that will change the score. I think it's more just when you have your daily conversations over a cup of coffee with your friends, your family, actually just talking about it, and then therefore using your own influence, even if it's in a small way, to impact other people, can really, I think, ultimately change the score and get the fans on side and get people behind it, and ultimately that can have big impacts.
Fantastic. Well, I hope you go on to talk about it for many more years, and I hope that we do manage to like you say, turn the corner on this. So one last question is, where are Man U going to finish this year?
I think they're 14th at the moment, aren't
they?
Okay, I'm going to say higher than 14th. I think top half, I think 9th. There's not too many points up to 9th or 8th, and then I think it's a bigger gap. So yeah, I think 9th, but I think we'll win the FA Cup.
Fair enough. I hope you do. I think Chelsea are out of it, but yeah. Well, listen, Ben Hardy-Jones, thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate the conversation. I wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you very much. And if you'd love to come to a Desert Vipers match, we've got 6 matches left this season.
I would, yeah, definitely.
We're currently top of the table, so fingers crossed we manage to make it to the knockout rounds. But yeah, we'd love to have your support and anyone who's listening.
Definitely.
Fantastic.
Thank you.